Excuse me. Excuse me? You dropped this.
Oh, thanks.
No problem.
How's everybody doing today? You doing good? Okay, I want to make sure because I'll be blatantly honest with you. Today's message isn't going to be one of those like, oh, I totally left like immediately refreshed. Today's message is one, I've been praying over this one for weeks, and this is going to be one especially for the fellas. I even posted it on like social networking and stuff and I've said it in the beginning of the series. Hey guys, there's going to come a week where like you need to wear your big boy pants, and that's today. And so if you're like, and this is not going to be a message that beats up on people. But here at Forefront, we do not believe that is a tactic that should be used. It's not okay. But we also believe that we need to talk about things honestly and openly. And the truth is that people's relationships are crumbling around our society. The truth is that there are men and women in marriages who feel like they are dying on the inside. Every single week, I talk with countless families who say to me, I just wish that things could be like the day that we stood and said, I do. And if you're married this morning and you've just been kind of cruising, this message today is for you. If you're single and you've been married, or you're divorced, or you're kind of waiting for the day that perfect someone comes in and it's not a cantaloupe or a dropped head of lettuce, that it is actually a ring, and you're waiting for that moment, this message is for you. If you are widowed or you are in a position where you're later on in life and that is not a goal of yours, you're just like, all right, I'm just going to live out my days on earth, and I'm just going to be just me. I don't need anybody else. This message is for you. And if you're in middle school or high school, I cannot stress to you enough how much today's message is for you. Because I wish that a generation would hear and really take heart what's happening. And I know right now you're just like, I want to go to the movies, and I want to write that note to that boy. Or now, I don't even think people write notes anymore. You're like texting them in Snapchat, whatever, tweetering them, and you're doing stuff, and you're getting to know them through a screen. If you get this, you won't repeat the things that you're watching your parents go through, or even for some of you guys that you're watching your parents go through now. And this is a tough thing, and we're going to spend 30 minutes. And it's I think about this sometimes, like we try to unpack a world of hurt in 30 minutes. Like you've been dealing with it for weeks and months. Some of you adults, your marriage is great, but you're living with the residual effects of what happened with mom and dad, or with another loved one. And you're kind of the living proof that what happens there impacts and ripple effects a generation and further, unless we stand up for it and put a stop to it. And so this, while I think it's an audacious goal to be able to say that we can spend 30 minutes talking about something that could revolutionize your life, I firmly believe that when we place God in the center of what's true, that we can it takes a second to revolutionize our lives when we begin to trust Him. And so, and I would say, as I've watched my own mom and dad go through amazing moments and not so amazing moments, as I've watched my siblings go through amazing moments and not so amazing moments, and loved ones that I care deeply about, and watching their relationships have highs and have lows, and then the countless families, you guys, and over the course, there are hundreds upon hundreds of people that attend Forefront and are a part of this church who say, I just want to know Jesus. I want to figure out this whole God thing, or at least try to begin to figure it out. I don't want to feel like there's a gaping wound inside my soul. I mean, if we're crying out loud, there's 600 plus, sometimes close to 700 people on a weekend that through different services and month through a month come here. And maybe, just maybe, we could get real quiet. I know we're normally serious, and then we laugh, and then we're serious, then we laugh. And I hope that we'll have moments where we kind of cut the tension in the room during this. But maybe we can get past the jokes and the sarcasm and the deflecting by just being funny in relationships and really get down to what matters. And I know if you're new here and you've come this morning, you're like, I have no idea what I just walked into. Like, I'm just like, what is he talking about? A friend invited me because I said I could get a cupcake after service, and now you're talking about stuff and it's heavy. I get it. But I do know, whether you know Jesus and this is, you've been coming for a little while, or you're brand new and you have no clue about this, we all have wounds. And those wounds that we inherit from family members and those wounds that are even in our own lives, if we don't tend to those wounds, that ripple effect could be catastrophic. And so today we're going to talk about what does it look like to live honorably and to really take seriously our lives. And I think that's something that, even though we might feel awkward and uneasy at times, when the rubber meets the road and when our head hits that pillow at night, we ask some of these ethereal questions, and my hope is that we can talk about it honestly. Are you guys okay with that today? Yeah. Everybody's like, I don't want to get too loud because I don't know what's going on. We're allowed to talk. We're going to laugh some. But first, I want to pray for us, if that's okay. Why don't you pray with me? God, today is your day. It's not our day. We come to you, some of us far from you, some of us close to you, some of us coasting along, but we really don't have much of a connection with you, and everywhere in between. And so we just ask you we know that you're here, that you're present, that you're real, we trust in that, but that we would believe it, that we would actually believe that you can do what only you can do, which is the miraculous, that defies logic, that defies what we know about this existence, and that you can change things that are just unexplainable. I ask that you would do that today in every single one of our lives, and it's through Jesus we pray. Amen. I want to start off by taking a little bit of a animal lesson, because that's where we should go when we're talking about marriage, is we should talk about birds. Not the birds and the bees. That's a whole different conversation, and I'll let you talk about that with your children on your own time. I have 3 daughters, and they'll never need to know because I'm going to lock them up till they're 30. It's being a responsible dad. That's how I roll. And so I want to talk about this animal here, and that is the African oxpecker. Anybody know about the African oxpecker? Yeah? No. You didn't expect today to walk in and go, I'm going to church. I'm probably going to hear about God, maybe about that Jesus guy. And you know what? I'm really looking forward to hearing about the African oxpecker. Like, that was not on your radar at all walking in. It's interesting because I wanted to read you some facts as we look. It's absolutely beautiful bird. Pretty cool. I don't know how it can hide well with that bright beak and that eye, just like I feel like it's staring right at me. No matter where you're sitting in the room right now, like, is he looking at me? It's just a picture. He is not staring at you, but he might attack you. It says, the African oxpecker feeds on the backs of zebra, elephants, hippopotamuses, giraffes, and other large African animals by eating small ticks and insects. Now you might think, that might be a good thing. They can't reach those things, whatever. It's also tolerated because they produce a hissing scream when they're startled, like kind of a personal, like, danger alarm. And so sort of like kids, just like all of a sudden they get hurt and they flip out. And so that's, if you're wondering why people have those, sometimes it's to serve around the house and to be a danger alarm. But here's what's interesting that I was reading about this animal, and it kind of unfolds what we're going to look at today. Because when people think about marriage, they think about this symbiotic relationship. And that's essentially what happens here. That I rely on you, you rely on me, and together you're living because you can feed off the stuff off my back. You're helping me because then I'm not dealing with all of these sores and things that goes on, that those insects and bugs could hurt me in some kind of way. But the interesting part about this bird is while it starts out to be friendly, an insect-eating helper, eventually it turns into a vampire bird, sucking the blood of the open wounds of the insects that have gone before. You see, what begins as a symbiotic relationship turns into a life-draining relationship. It takes away life instead of protecting and enhancing it. You see, at first, and do not elbow the person next to you and say, that's what our marriage is like. Because you're done. It's splitting it down the middle, 50-50. But this starts out happy. And I think that's how nobody goes to their wedding day. They're standing there at the altar, and the guy looks down, and Canon in D is playing, and she's walking forward, and everyone's, whatever, and he's, and all the guys are like, I'll never cry at my wedding. And almost every wedding I do, the guys are like, she looks so beautiful. And they're dying because they're walking down the aisle. And they get there. Nobody's anticipating and leading up to that day going, man, I can't wait for this to be miserable. No. Like, there's not a single person that I meet on their wedding. They're nervous. They're anticipating all of the things that would go on, but there's not a single person in the hundreds of weddings that I've done that I turn to them and I go, so are you excited about the day? I go, I just know it's going to be awful all the rest of my life. I hate it. Don't even know why we're doing this. Like, nobody does that. We get 4 years in, 5 years in. We even mentioned in the first week that year 3 is kind of the mark. Year 1, well, we all know what's happening in year 1. And in year 2, you start learning about the quirks. And then in year 3, you're like, we survived the quirks. We're going to make it. And it's the happiest year of marriage that they've done in studies. But what happens in year 5, in year 6? It's interesting because in year 7 is usually when people begin to see that crack in the armor and go, nothing is going to change. Nothing is like my wedding day, and I want to move on. And I wonder if there's something more there under the surface that really can help people understand what it means to be in relationships and to really focus on what matters. Because this is when people usually go to counseling and do this. And all the principles that we're going to talk about today, I believe that if you do these in your life, even if you're not married, even if you're not in a relationship, or if you prepare the way for this, what I tell my daughters is if you meet a boy and if he doesn't, this is what you need to say to him if you find out he doesn't have time for Jesus. If you don't have time for Jesus, I don't have time for you. And I asked my daughter this the other day. I was like, what do you tell boys that don't have time for Jesus? She was like, bye, Felicia. And I was like, I'm not quite sure where you learned that, and I asked her, I was like, where did you learn that? She's like, I hear things. I just pick up things. I'm like, you're too grown for your britches. You're not dating until you're like 35. But it's true. I want them to get that foundation. And I love, there's a book that I quoted in the first week. We're in the last week of the series, we're going to be giving away some copies. And in your notes section of the app too, there's a link that if you want to order the book, you can do that. It's called You and Me Forever by Francis and Lisa Chan, this married couple, pastoral couple. And they talk about this symbiotic relationship, but that it's not so much about the marriage. And I love what they share here. I want you to read this. Again, our marriage problems are not really marriage problems. I want you to hear this as you're dealing with relationships, as you dive into relationships, as you're in the middle of your marriage and you're thinking about and you've said, well, we have marriage problems. They're not really marriage problems. They are heart problems. They are God problems. Our lack of intimacy with God causes a void that we try to fill with the frailest of substitutes, like wealth, like pleasure, like fame, like respect, like people. And interestingly enough, our heart problem, we try to fill it with what? Like marriage, like relationships. I can't count, I don't have enough fingers and toes to count for you the number of women who come in counseling sessions and go, Jason, if I could just find a good, godly man, I would just be so happy and everything would be great and whatever. And I'm like, and what I respond back to them is, no, you don't need a godly man. You need to be fulfilled by God. Well, I understand that and I get that. And here's what happens. And I say this about females because there are less guys coming to me and go, I just need a godly girl. Like most of the time, they're just running around doing stupid stuff, and then they realize they're stupid, and then they move on. But these ladies, and it happens, I don't have enough times to count it, where they find a guy, and they fall off the map here. God gave me a guy. God gave me this amazing guy. No. You have relationship problems. You have a hole, and you tried to fill that hole with a guy, and now you're off the radar. You don't engage your faith. You don't engage God, and that was God's gift to you, And yet that guy doesn't lead you anywhere, especially to church, especially to your faith, especially to honor you. And then we wonder why we end up getting married, and then all of a sudden it falls apart, and we go, I just don't understand. And someone that loved God, loved you, loved God more than you, and we talk about this all the time, needed to talk to you and say, hey, you're dumb. I love you, but that's not good for you. Because now we don't want to say, oh, I just don't want to offend them. I don't want them to be mad at me. I could see that it's not going well. But if I say something, they'll be so upset. And I see that they're kind of happy. And it's like, but you can see down, it's like when you're parenting and you watch the kid with the fork and they're walking over the outlet. There's not a parent in the room that goes, they're just going to, I want to tell them, but eventually they're just going to have to learn these things. And so, because I don't want to offend them. I don't want them to cry, because that would just be, and then I'd be an awful parent. Who makes their kids cry and whatever? No! You go over there and you yank it and you say, no! And they're like, ah! And you go, I want you to remember this! Don't do this! Why? Because you don't want them to die. And we laugh at that, but then all of a sudden we get into these moments where people, you and I, try to fill the hole that only God can fill. And we fill it with these things. And I love what Francis and Lisa Chan lead us to, is to say, listen, there is a hole inside of you that cannot be filled with wealth and power and things and prosperity and your job and your friendships. It can only be filled by God. And if you jump into marriage trying to fill the void, it's going to go very bad for you. And God wants more for you, and He wants more for me. And in this passage that we're going to look at, it's the most unpopular passage ever about relationships. Every time I read it, I usually hear a collective groan from women. All right? But I don't want you to dismiss what we're going to look at today. So if you have a Bible, I'd love for you to turn over to Ephesians chapter 5. Ephesians chapter 5, we're going to be starting in verse 21 in a little bit. We give away Bibles for free at the Get Connected table. We want everybody to have a copy of the Bible, your physical copy, so when the lights go out, the electricity goes away, when the zombie apocalypse starts, that you'll have something, all right? And so when the cell towers are down and you're running for your life with a machete in the woods, at least you'll have a Bible. And so pick up a hard copy of the Bible. We want you to have that. But we really want you to be able to do that so you can learn about your Bible. It's easy to type in a name, but it's different when you're actually hands-on with it. I use a physical copy of the Bible. But if you're into digital stuff, you can download the app, or you can download the Forefront Church app. In all of the quotes that we talk about today, a link to the book that I mentioned, a place to take notes. You can email that to yourself, because I don't want you to miss what God has for you. So when you get to Wednesday or Thursday, and you guys, it is like Royal Rumble. One of you is like Macho Man Randy Savage and the Junkyard Dog, and you're going at it, and you're just angry, and you're yelling. You tell the kids, go to your room, and you're fighting. That somebody can say, yeah, uh-oh. And somebody can say, time out. Let's take a breath. What was it that we were learning before? Because I don't want us to get to a place where this is our existence. And so we don't use these tools just to have tools. We use these tools because we want you to engage your faith more than just an hour during a Sunday. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 21 and following. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. And so right out of the gate, everybody submits to everybody. Listen, we're going to submit to one another, but then it gets a little deeper. Wives, and don't get hung up on this. Ladies, please, 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 please. Let's finish this out today. Don't get hung up on this next word. Submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. I know there's 30% of you ladies, I lost you already. Come on back. We're here. This is a safe place. By the end of it, you're going to give me high fives in the lobby, and you're going to be like, yeah, that's right, and all this stuff, but just hold on, okay? Submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. Verse 23, for the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Don't lose you. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they fed and cared for their body, just as Christ does the church, for we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be bound and united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. I wrote down bond in big letters, team. I also wrote down Avengers Assemble. There's this collective, sorry, I'm nerdy and I need to picture this, that there's this moment that comes together, that there's this bond that nothing can break. My wife, Carrie, when I was working at a church for about 10 years, and the lead guy that was there had what he thought was a very nice sit down with me, where he said, Jason, you'd be really great in ministry if you would just cover up your tattoos and get rid of your piercings. And kind of told me, he said, then one day you'll be effective, but until then you're not. And I was like, wow, this pep talk's really going awesome. And so he was like, all right, let's see. And he paid for lunch because somehow that was nice and kind of him. And he said, why don't we drive back to the office? I said, why don't you drive back to the office? I'm going to walk. And I came home and told my wife, who I love dearly. I was like, I don't know what to do with this. And she said, I know what you can do with this. You can tell him, she said in some very kind, nice ways to pack sand. I was thinking very different ways that I wanted to say that. And she was so encouraging and came alongside me. And here's what we can do, and here's what happens in our life with God. And God must have more in store if he's ending this chapter. But you need to go and you need to talk with him. And I know plenty of marriages where the husband would never go to his wife in that way. That they would come home, make the decision, tell the wife what was happening, and move on. And there's this beautiful scenario that happens between my wife and I where we lean into one another. That even though that God would say that I'm the head of the household, that we are a team. And that she has moments where she can say no to me, where she can check me, where she could say, I love you, but you're stupid, and I need to tell you why. And I would lead out of this as we get into some of this, that guys, if you are running such a kingdom that in your own little world that your wife doesn't have moments where she can say that into you, you are not a husband, you're a dictator. I want that to sink in. You are no longer acting as a man because you're not doing what God called to do. There are too many women getting hurt across this nation verbally and physically and are running and fleeing from relationships where men think, and I've seen this happen, where men who say that they honor God use the Bible and tout it as some sort of tool that they can rule over their families. You are not acting in any honorable way when you act like that. And as we process this is not a marriage issue. This is a heart issue. And I started writing this down, and I kind of, in my head, unpacked it this way, is that heart problems with God lead to relational discontent and disillusion with others. This isn't a marriage issue. This is a heart condition. You have a problem listening to God when you can't honor your spouse both ways. Well, I can't honor him. He's just mean, and he's just this. And I can't trust him, and I can't do these things. That's also a hard issue on your side, too. And I think it kind of likens back to what we learned when we went to Chuck E. Cheese Pizza. How many of you guys have ever been to that place on earth, also known as hell? If you've been there. Yeah, if you've gone there with children, it's awful. They're like, whatever, and you're just like, Jesus, don't take the wheel, take me home. Like, I don't want to be here. And we've been to plenty of birthday parties that friends invite us to, and it's great. And we'll show up if you invite us, but no, that's what I'm thinking on the inside. Like, hey, so you having fun? And I'll go, kill me. And what happens when you play the games? You get what? You get these tickets. And you do the skee ball, and you do the wheel, and you get all these things, and you get some tickets like Oprah. You get tickets, you get tickets, everybody gets tickets. And you go through, and then you get these prizes. And they build up, and you're like, oh, I got to just play one more game. I got to get that prize. Oh my gosh, if I play enough, I can win a PlayStation 4. You would have to be there till you're 45, if you're a kid, to 45 to get a PlayStation. But they do it, and we go through it, and we do this. But this is how we approach marriage. Oh, you did the dishes? Oh, you thought about me on Mother's Day? Oh, you're working hard at your job and you brought home a paycheck? Oh, you did that with the kids. And somehow we start divvying these out. And then we call them in for favors. Oh, you did this, and this is great, and we keep throwing tickets everybody's way. But then when they don't perform in the way that we want them to, because remember, this isn't a marriage issue, this is a heart issue. You let me down, give me back those tickets. You didn't do what I asked you to do, give those back. You didn't what? You don't deserve those. And so we have to be able to go back to where our heart is and how this is translating to a much bigger picture when it comes to our interaction with God, in our interaction with someone that we say, do we really believe as we stand and we hold hands together and look each other in the eye until death do us part? And so we hear that word submission and we don't like it. But that comes out of a heart issue, and we would put it in, if you're taking notes, this way is kind of the main idea. That submission flows from a heart that follows God and doesn't simply what? Flirt with faith. Are you a Christian? Yeah, I'm a Christian. I go to church like once, a couple months. Yeah, do all right. And I'm not saying that, like, I know people's schedules are busy, and I'm not, patronizing you if you have a rough time at being able to get places. But your church attendance is more than your, like, just kind of like I dabble in church, or I hear people say, oh, I'm a spiritual person. When it comes to, if that word submission in both passages makes us reel and kind of kick back and go, have you seen them? Like, immediately that's what happens. We hear that word submission, we're like, Jason, you have not been in my house. If you heard what I heard, you would not. And so we do. Submission flows from a heart that follows God. And so we follow God and submit. We can just go, why wouldn't I, in both instances, with both people, follow under submission? Because I know that they love God, because they don't simply flirt with faith. That's a godly woman, that's a godly man, and I could trust him, and I can trust her, and it's a symbiotic relationship that isn't going, how can I turn into a vampire and get everything that I want? And the first one out of the gate is, for you ladies, is submitting to your husband. And I know that we don't like this word. I get it. We don't like the word submit. My husband's this, my husband's that, and I labeled this in my notes, and this might be weird. I put the Cooper effect, and this would be, this is actually the Bradley Cooper effect, if you will. You could substitute that for the Ryan Gosling effect, if you'd like. That this kind of is one of those moments where, and I see like ladies, they'll post things on social networking and other things, and I'll see these moments, and they'll be like, there's the Ryan Gosling thing, and it's like, hey, girl, I know you've been up late making your Pinterest projects, but you doing all right. And all the ladies are like, Ryan Gosling, whatever. And or like Bradley Cooper, I don't even know what just happened right there. And you got that for free today. And so like, or is this moment like my wife, where she loves me, she's not going anywhere, but I would feel a little threatened if Bradley Cooper walked in the room right now. Like I'm secure enough in my marriage to also say like, it's a good-looking dude. Like, all right, he'll walk in the room, and if he walked up on stage right now and knows he and we were having an interview, I would make sure that he was facing this way because my wife's sitting over there. And I would be like, sit down, because I don't want her to like check out your rump or anything like that, or whatever. But my wife's not going anywhere. But there's something about. But I hear ladies talk about it, and you can insert whatever guy that you choose. But there's these moments where you're like, oh. and its looks and the way that they act and the way that they do. Like maybe if that could be, and when we're like, oh, I saw somebody post a thing about Ryan Reynolds. He was putting together IKEA furniture, and it was a video, and they're like, I'll help him do IKEA furniture. I saw like 13 ladies, like, I'll help him do whatever he wants. And I'm like, well, if you could just have that same effect when it came to your husband, man, your marriage would be better. I love God so much that I'm going to love my husband as if he were that amazing. Instead of talking behind his back or to his face or to your girlfriends, I wish he would. Because your attitude loves him into the position that he could be. And if you're bad-mouthing your husband behind his back, if you were bad-mouthing him to his face, why on God's green earth would he want to rise up to anything if all you do is speak harm, hurt, and neglect into his life? At some point you have to say, I want to be the bigger person. You're not being the bigger person beating him down. But we get to this word submit and we go, but Jason, you don't understand. How do I love somebody that does like it? And this is where I want to get to the guys. Guys, you need to be able to love your wife. I want to read that passage again. It's not going to be on the screen, but it says, husband, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing of the water through the word, to present her to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle, any other blemish, but holy and blameless. And in this same way, husbands ought to, what? Love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. And what I tell women in this passage, ladies, is when we get to that word submit, that there has to be such a relationship that your husband loves God so much and leads you to beautiful places that you go, why on earth wouldn't I trust and follow him? And so the onus and the weight of this, fellas, as you read this, and because I've heard guys do this, you know what? You're my wife, submit to me. And I hear this very attitude and I go, time out. One, can we break for a second to let you know that even the very nature of the tone that you're saying that passage in makes you a dictator? And so let's unravel some of this. And let's find out that this needs to be something that, fellas, you need to be a man. And this is the thing, and I'm not talking about you can high five and down a beer the fastest and wear a football jersey and watch afternoon Sunday football and go shoot a gun and drive a big truck because you're overcompensating because you don't know what it means to be a man because nobody taught you. Now, if you have any of those things, that's fine, but that does not define you as a man. God does, and it's defined by your heart and your relationship with him. And if you want to know what it means to be a man, you love people the same way that Jesus did the church. It doesn't mean that you have to get angry and you have to fly off the handle and I'm going to protect people and I'm going to be this. You know, it's fine to be able to be protecting and be macho, but if all of that flies in the face of loving God, you are nothing more than a wolf in sheep's clothing. And so you love her. You foster that relationship. I have dads that come to me, I don't understand why my kids are off the rails and my marriage is so tough. And I go, I know. Like, let's be guys. We're just talking as guys. Yeah, because you're an awful example. And they're like, whoa. And guys, back up. Anytime that our ego is hit, our armor is nicked, then all of a sudden we're like, whoa, wait a second. What are you talking about? And then we get defensive. But our families follow our lead. I have dads that come all the time and we talk like our student ministry is absolutely amazing. We have men and women. Our children's ministry is great. But we have men who come and they go, why is my kid off the rails? And I go, I don't know, because you bring them Sunday mornings and that's great, but you've never invited other adults to be into their life. And they have adults every Sunday night that are doing amazing things with your teenagers. And your teenager has no idea. Well, I can't make them do that because their faith has to be their own, and I don't want to be that person. Well, yeah, you don't get them up in the morning and go, do you really feel like going to school today? No, I'm not really feeling it, Dad. I'm just whatever. You just stay home. You'll be good. You come home. Do you want to eat this dinner that we have for? No, I was just thinking Cheetos would be good tonight. All right, whatever. Your mom worked hard. I worked hard, whatever, but you're fine. Do that. And Dad, I was thinking about, 13 years old. I'm thinking about going and getting a tattoo. Well, that's your decision. Just go to your friend's house like that. No! You make them do certain things. Why? Because you are a parent. You're an adult. You're a parent. They have no idea. Science tells us that their entire brain is still forming. If you're in middle school and high school, I love you. But you will realize when you get to be an adult, you'll look back on these years and go, why? Why didn't somebody tell me? And your parents need to be the ones to tell you. And part of that is engaging faith. Part of that with your wife and with your kids is to be able to lead them. And you go, I haven't come to faith yet. But I want my kids to live that way. I want my wife to live that way. And I would say they will live that way when you get up off your tail and begin to trust God. Begin to move in Him. Begin to say, my life is not my own. And I'm going to love my spouse and love my kids and in relationships so deeply because the outpouring of who God is. And I can guarantee you, because I watch men that do this, that their kids aren't perfect. Their kids still do dumb things sometimes. And they still have moments where they butt heads with their spouse. But I can guarantee you, because I watch it happen, that their lives and their marriages and the way that they move is revolutionized because they look to God. And Francis and Lisa Chan sum it up best this way. We don't stare at God, we'll spend our time staring at lesser things. Namely, what? Ourselves. Not leading is the pinnacle of narcissistic behavior. You're the center of your world, so you do what you want to do, and you don't care about anybody else, and nobody can tell you otherwise. And that is how you run your kingdom. You're not a king. You're a selfish 5-year-old. And I'm not saying that to name call. I'm saying because that's how I lived my life until I met God. That everything was about me. What music I liked, what things I did, where I went, who I hung out with, who was in it, and everything was take, take, take. I was the African oxpecker. I was the one who sat on people's backs, and it started out fine, and then I sucked the blood, the life out of people, and I moved on to the next thing. And for you and I, if we are ever going to have relationships that rise up to the way that God wants you and I to be, we have to come to the conclusion that He is the only one that can fill the hole inside of us. And that when we meet other people, that they're not going to fill that void. That when we have a job that we love going to, that will not fill the void. That the only way that we can come to a place where our relationships, especially our marriages, are symbiotic in nature, the way that God designed, is when we learn how to love Him. And then these other words that pop up that we bristle when we hear them would not be things that we would look at and go, oh man, that we would reclaim those, that those are beautiful things. And my wife would tell you, you can stop and talk to her. I am not a dictator in our relationship. But it's not the other way around where people put out the memes and other things like, what do men do their marriage? They just say, yes, ma'am, and those running jokes. And then you let your wife run the household too. That is not how it works. That's not the way God designed. Someone has to lead. Throw all of us in a deserted island, somebody's going to step up and lead. Some people are going to get voted off the island. Some people are going to step up and they're going to lead. Why? Because somebody has to lead. That's not being mean. That's not being sexist. And God said in this relationship, as you guys move together, that you're going to be a team and somebody has to be the leader, but they're not going to be a dictator. And they're going to lead well. And the thing is, we look at those words and they're not going to be hurtful and they're not going to be bad. And I love this, that submission flows from a heart that follows God and doesn't simply flirt with faith. And there are many of us who are simply flirting with faith. We've gone on a couple blind dates, and then we're like on date like number 5, and we kind of engage faith, but we aren't to a place where we want to trust him. And I love my wife, and she is absolutely amazing. And what got me was not, because I had started following God before I met her. I was a pastor, and I remember we were kind of hanging out, and she actually, how we met, we had known each other for a while back, but how we met, she came to a small group Bible study that was held at our apartment. But everybody else knocked on the door except her. She just walked in because she told her friends, I know these guys that are here, and there's going to be a bunch of single guys, and so she did just come in the house. And there were close to 35, 40 people in a 2-bedroom downstairs apartment in Greenbrier, Chesapeake. And I remember looking across the room, and it was not those, I looked across the room and I saw her, and it would kind of hit. It wasn't like, you never close, any of that stuff. Like, there wasn't like that kind of moment. But there was something. And I looked at it, there really was like this purity that I was like, I want to know more about this girl. And as I started learning about what the relationship that between men and women, and now I have 3 daughters who have the exact same eyes as her. And so I'm reminded every time now when she's not there, I'm still getting reminded of it. And it's a blessing and a curse, because later on that's going to be awful for me when boys find out about them. But I see it, and I'm reminded about what my role is. My role is not to lead with an iron fist. It's to lead with open hands and a humble heart, and to walk it out together. Because God hasn't given me a wife. He's entrusted me with one of his children. And that's not something to take lightly. And if you're in a relationship, or you're thinking about a relationship, or if you're single and you're hoping for a relationship, that void cannot be filled by someone else. That has to be filled by God, first and foremost. But if you're in that together, the only way that that stays healthy is if you move forward in love. And you don't think about yourself, you think about them. And it starts with not just dancing around and flirting with faith. It means being all in. And my prayer, ladies, is that you are all in with God. And that you find a man that can love you deeply. That loves Jesus way more than he loves you. Because if he loves Jesus more than he loves you, you hit the jackpot. And guys, that you would love God deeply. And you would love God more than you love her. Because when you do, she's going to be like, I'll follow you to the ends of the earth. Forget Prince Charming, you're amazing. But it starts with him. Would you pray with me?